on this one. And I think you all have to tell me it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, or you have to say yes or something like that, that I'm recording.
Got it. It says
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Oh, got it. Okay, I see.
Good. Okay. Okay, so welcome Deborah and Sandra and Dawn, and then Ed. Hopefully he'll pop in, or else we'll see him next time around. So let me introduce you to textures and give you some idea of what we can do with textures, because I think they are absolutely fascinating. And sometimes I just wish I had more time just to kind of, get into that rabbit hole and get into the mode of doing it. So we can, in textures, we can take a photo like this. So, just your basic old ordinary photo, looks the way it looks. And then we can overlay it with textures and turn it into that. So we can take, something that looks traditional and then overlay it with textures to where it looks totally different. And that's, to me, what the fun of textures are. So we can take textures like this burlap type canvas texture, and then we can overlay it with words or text if we would like to. And it gives us the ability to take one picture and turn it into something else, make it look like something else. We can take a photo that maybe was okay, but we don't quite know exactly what we're going to do with it. Or maybe it's not a strong standalone photograph, and then we can overlay it with other textures and turn it into something else. Once again, the hearts in the background are one of my photographs. The guy with the fishing poles is one of my photographs. And then I've overlaid them on top of each other along with the text. So you can take one picture, two pictures, more pictures, overlay them with one texture, two textures, three textures, to kind of do whatever you would like to turn that photo into something else. We can overlay a photo with writing, and that writing can be writing that we have photographed off of a wall somewhere. This writing came from an old cathedral in Italy. So we can use writing, or we can use our own writing. So if you were writing in your journal, or your grandmother wrote in her journal, or your mother wrote in her journal, then you could use that writing as an overlay on top of other photographs. So you can use your own writing, somebody else's writing, to overlay that also as a texture. You can do anything silly if you want to. So this is just a simple photograph that I took out of the skylight of my car after a rainstorm, and then overlaid it on top of a photo that I took shortly thereafter. And, so you get something that looks like that. So you can play around with it. You can, once more, take a simple photo and turn it into something that looks old. So instead of your modern photo, then you can turn it into something that looks old. This was a cell phone photo that I took when I was in Paris. And I just liked that guy with or lady or whoever it was with the umbrella down there beside the building made it look older than what it was. And so I overlaid it with some textures and ended up turning it into what looks like an oil painting. So the fun of textures is that you can do all kinds of things with them. This is a fishing eagle from Africa. I like the pose, I like the wings, I like the face on the bird, but the actual photograph is slightly blurred. So it's not a photograph that I would ever print big. It's not a photograph that I would ever display big. It's not a photograph that I would send out to a magazine. It's not a photograph that I would post big even on social media, because people might see that it's slightly blurred. But if I overlay it with textures, it doesn't matter if it's slightly blurred. And so this is also a way that we can save some of the photos that we have that we like, and we can use them in a different way instead of using them in the traditional way that we might use a photograph. So this one, slightly blurred. but it still has lots and lots of room once you start throwing textures on top of it. So that's the fun of textures too. And then this one, when I was in Morocco and saw this man in the jalaba walk by us down this alleyway, immediately I thought this would be a texture. I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. I even kind of knew the textures that I was going to overlay on top of it. And because we're dealing with art, I'm an editorial photographer. So for anything I send into the Houston Chronicle, I can't take anything out or I can't add anything. But textures are my art. So in this photograph of the man walking down the alleyway, I have taken out the trash can. I have taken out the trash. I have taken out all the electrical wires. I have taken out the fire extinguisher. I've taken out the electrical box. I've taken out everything in here that didn't need to be here, and then overlaid it with several different textures, and then erased the textures from the man so that there weren't as much textures over him. And so this is one of those really fun things that we can do with textures as well, is that we can do something with some of these photos and turn them into something other than what we really took them for the first time around. But the moment I saw this guy walk through this alleyway, I knew this was going to be a texture. And I knew that the people in the group were kind of like, why is Kathy taking a picture of that guy? Well, I knew what this was going to be. It was going to be a texture. So we can take a simple photograph and then turn it into something else. And with your photographs that you decide to use for your textures, one thing that I do recommend is that you keep them as clean as you can. So you might need to take out a couple of sticks or a couple of twigs using your healing brush or your clone stamp brush, so that we can kind of get rid of some of the clutter in the photograph, because I find that in textures, they work a little bit better if they're a little bit on the cleaner side. But we know what we're going to do with them. We're going to turn them into a piece of art later on. And so that means we can go in and we can take things out. And it doesn't have to be precise, once again, because we're going to cover it up with something else. So we can take, for instance, this black crested titmouse. You know, he's got a good expression. He's got a fairly good background to him. He's got the neat little agarita berries that he's on. And then overlay this little black crested titmouse with textures. And so here's one option. So it's got more of a canvas feel to it and an oil painting feel to it. Overlay it with another texture that might have more of a watercolor brush to it. So we can overlay these with different textures, creating different works of art with them. This is one that you'll see me work on in class, and this is a black nun bird down in Brazil. Not an outstanding shot of the bird, but it's a bird that I hadn't seen very often. And so by taking out some of the trash in the photograph, blowing it up just a little bit, and once again, because we don't have to worry so much about noise with textures, we can blow things up if we need to. And then by just cropping in on it, doing some minor adjustments to it with your Adobe Camera Raw or your Lightroom, bringing out the shadows and that type of thing. Then I can take this photo and now I can overlay it with textures. And now I've got something where I can throw in brush strokes on top of it. So we just simply went from that to that. And then the neat thing about it is every time I work on this picture, because I use it in almost every class, I come up with a final end result because my mood is different when I'm working on it at different times. So I create something that looks a little bit different every single time that I work on it. And the fun thing with textures as well is that once you get going, sometimes things work really, really well, and we just keep on going. And other things sometimes don't work as well. So maybe we jettison that one and don't go as far with it. So you see that in those three different options, it's the exact same starting point. It's just different work as I go through it and different moods as I'm working on it, just depending on what I'm doing. So textures make it fun to kind of get in there and just start playing. Another thing that textures are good for is rescuing some photos. Gary and I got an opportunity several years ago to go up to Kearney, Nebraska, to the migration of the sandhill cranes. And it was an exciting event for me because I've seen migrations in different places around the world, and this was one of the migrations I hadn't yet seen. So we go up to Kearney, Nebraska, where there's all the sandhill cranes from the lower 48, all gathering before they fly north and even going over to Siberia. And when we get there, it rains, sleets, snows, hails, fog, overcast. The weather is horrible the entire weekend. And we're getting into blinds before sunrise in the morning to make sure that we're in the middle of the river and the birds don't see us and that type of stuff. And every single day is horrible. So I'm having to use extremely high ISO. The lighting conditions are horrible. I'm never getting any silhouettes against sunsets like I was hoping for. Everything was horrible. I didn't even want to look at the pictures when I got back home. It was like, I'm not even looking at them. There wasn't anything in there that I thought was any good. But then I started playing with textures. And I found that, well, okay, textures don't care if the picture's totally sharp. And textures don't care if there's high ISO. And textures don't care if there's noise. And textures don't care if it's not totally clear. So what I ended up doing with all those photos from that weekend was I made an exhibit of fine art photographs, and I printed them all on watercolor paper, giclée, so that the ink even ran together, and printed them on, a really nice rag watercolor paper. And so here's one, for instance, that I did, and then here's another one that I did, and then here's another one that I did. Not sharp, not clear, not a prize photo, but the wings are all where they should be. The birds are all doing what they should be. And then I think here's another one in this whole series. And I ended up with 20 photos that I really liked out of this whole series. And in this series, then I framed them and that type of thing. And the exhibit ended up being different and a different clientele than for what it would have been if it was photographs. So now it was something different. It was more art as opposed to photography. And what I've done with the pictures since then is when there's galas for fundraising for, healthcare causes or whatever it might be, and somebody calls and wants to know if we'll donate a book or something like that, then I donate one of these textured watercolors because I figured there's more people out there that would want to hang a watercolor on their wall than might want to hang a photograph on their wall. And people might be willing to pay more for a watercolor than they would for a photograph. So they've been received very well and I've enjoyed them. But once again, it allowed me to salvage what otherwise was a totally disappointing shoot. And so you might have some photos that can do the same thing, that they just need to be lifted out of the ashes, so to speak. So textures, we can buy them. Deborah mentioned that she bought a couple of packs of textures, so we can buy textures. So if you look on your handout, I've given you some of the companies that I like to buy textures from. And one of the textures, this is French Kiss collection right here that you're seeing. And these are kind of turn of the 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century French writing, newspapers, etchings, that type of thing. And so you buy these and you can then use them to overlay on your photographs. It would have to be the right type of photograph. Also, you probably wouldn't want to overlay this over a picture from Africa, but there might be some African pictures that might turn out, working just fine. But the fun thing with this French Kiss collection is there's all kinds of stuff in it. There's handwriting in it, there's newspapers, there's these stamps, these postmark stamps. And so there's all kinds of different stuff in there. So that's the French Kiss collection. And then here's some of the other ones. I think these are Fly Muse, if I'm not mistaken, and from Fly Papers. And you see how this one has a, looks like a plaster over with some cracks in it where the canvas is actually showing through. And then this one is just some splotchy stuff, some splotchy different colors. You're going to use these plaster type textures for one thing, and you're going to use these colored things, colored textures for another thing. So it's nice because they come in these packages. You can sort them out, figure out what's in them. There are a lot of different ones. I'll go back to this. There's a lot of different ones that I've given you, such as the deviant art. It's a little bit more like tattoo art or graffiti. Brushy breezy with textures, photomorphs. And then Kathleen Clemens is a really talented photographer who uses a lot of textures in her work. If you want to go look at her website, I think you'll enjoy hers. Kathleen Clemens has worked, trained a lot with Donna Eaton, who's also another master of textures, Jamie Davidson, who's also another master of textures. Donna, Deborah, you worked with Jamie, didn't you, on a workshop? And she's just there, those three women, Kathleen Clemens, Donna Eaton, and Jamie Davidson, they're just really, really, really good with textures. We're also seeing Jackie Kramer coming up, who's also really good with textures as well. And Kathleen Clemens has started selling some of her texture collections. So the neat thing is you can just buy these things and then, you've got them on your computer and then you can start working with them right away. You can also make your own textures and photograph your own textures. And over the years, since I've started doing textures, I just start noticing things like brick walls, stones, gravel, chain link fence, canvas, linen. A couple of months ago, I was doing an aerobics class up here in my office, a Zoom aerobics class. And I was down on my back on my yoga mat and looked up at the ceiling. And I realized that the thick plaster on the ceiling that I have always hated would make a really, really good texture. And so I did a whole lot of photography of my ceiling, and it's just nice, globby plaster that I'm not particularly thrilled with, but it makes really good textures. So you see here on the bottom also, I'll use this one in a little bit. It's just some twinkly lights that I put up against a black background. And sometimes I keep blurred photographs as backgrounds for when we're doing hummingbird photography, for instance, or macro photography. But sometimes I keep these blurred photographs also as textures, so I can use them for color. Like the green that you see way over here on the side, this is a favorite background of mine when we're doing hummingbirds. And we need an artificial background because it's just a nondescript background. So you can use blurred photographs, you can use brick walls, you can use gravel, all kinds of stuff that you can think of to use for your own textures. So layers, how much have you used layers?
I've never used layers.
Okay.
It's the only thing I haven't done.
Ah, good blank slate.
Yeah.
I've
Deborah?
used them a little bit lately, mainly with the focus stacking that I learned with you in the
Okay.
macro class.
Okay, very good. Sandra, have you used layers?
I think a little bit. I don't know if it was focus stacking, but it was something else that you did that we did some layers, but not much. No.
Okay. This is a good class for learning layers. And layers, if you haven't used them very much, they remind me very much of the old World Book encyclopedia that you might have had when you were a kid. And in one of them, there was these acetate sheets that you could fold over, or not fold over, but lay over different parts of the body so that we could see what the interior of the body looked like. And then there was another one where we could fold over the acetate sheets on the interior of a frog to see what the interior of a frog looked like. And this is no different than what layers is. Layers is just where we're overlaying different photographs on top of each other, and where there's clear areas and where there's solid areas, the solid areas block and the clear areas let us see through. And so layers are no different than that old World Book encyclopedia that you might have seen when you were a kid. But they are tricky and they are confusing, and I'll admit that. So what I'm going to do with you all is I am going to introduce you to what I call recipes. And layers to me are equivalent to baking. I would never bake a loaf of bread, even though I've made hundreds of loaves of bread in my life. I would never bake a loaf of bread without getting the recipe out. So I still need to know how many cups of flour to put in and how many of this and how many of that and how many of this. Same thing with cookies, same thing with a cake. So to me, layers are like a recipe. So in your handout, I am going to give you recipes for your layers. And so that you can follow step by step by step by step by step with me. And then you can then recreate the photograph by following along step by step by step by step. And then if something goes wrong, then you know that one of the steps, either previous or something leading up to it, didn't work right. The same as if our bread didn't rise or our cookies came out hard as rocks, which mine have come out hard as rocks in years past. Yes. So what we're going to do with my recipes is I'm going to give you my recipe, and then you can follow it verbatim when you start trying to do your own layers. So hopefully everything will come out a little bit better. And by the way, I have a whole folder full of what I call how-tos. And this is on my computer. And these are when you want to know how to do something. Well, how do you remove the background? Now it's easier now, but how do you move the background from a photograph? Okay, so somewhere along the way, I had to go watch the YouTube video, write down all the instructions, and then perfect it to make sure it was right. That became a how-to. So now in that folder on my computer, I have probably 50 or 60 different how-tos. How do you do this? Because sometimes we don't need to do something except maybe once every year. So that by the time we come back to doing it again, we will have already forgotten. So those are what I call my recipes. And so I'm going to share my recipes with you. And then in one of the homework assignments, I'm going to ask you to write a recipe and make sure it's foolproof and share it with everybody else as well. So that's what we're going to cover tonight. Okay. Questions for me while I switch screens?
I have one.
Sure.
How much editing of the original photo do you do before you start playing with the layers and the textures?
Sometimes it depends. I might play with it a little bit, and then after I work on the texture, I might find out I should have worked on it a little bit more. And then I might end up
to the original image and work on it more before
you can,
Okay.
and then you can bring that in. And you'll find that you do that, okay, this is not clean enough, or this isn't where I want it to be, or I should have cropped it in a little different way or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so now I'm going to share my desktop with you. Any other questions real quick, Sandra, Dawn?
No, we're good so far.
Nope, hanging in there, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so let me start out on page 3. And if you need to move anything around on your screen, feel free to do it. I need to move some stuff around on my screen. There we go. So if you need to move anything around on your screen, feel free to do that right now. There we go. Okay, and you'll find me periodically having to move you all around on my screen because I still want to see your faces. I still want to look at you while we're going through this. So I'm in Photoshop right now. You can start in Bridge or you can start in Adobe Camera Raw. Excuse me, you can start in Bridge, Adobe Camera Raw, you can start in Lightroom, whichever one you would like. But for this method on page 3, we are going to start in Photoshop. I'm going to go File, Open. And when I go File, Open, I'm going to go to a folder I have for textures. So under My Pictures, right here, I have made a folder called Textures. And this is where I keep all my textures. Now, if you're like Deborah said, she bought some textures already and she hasn't used them, I would suggest if you maybe bought some textures somewhere along the way, that you round them all up off your computer and you put them all in one folder. So all of my textures are in my Lightroom catalog, but for working on them on a day-to-day basis, I also have them over in a folder and I know where I can get them. And then anytime I buy any new textures, then I just throw them in here. So they're all in here. So every time I buy anything new, here's all my French kiss textures, for instance. Anytime I buy anything new, I just throw all my textures in here.
Kathy, just a quick question. You said you also have them in your Lightroom catalog. Can you briefly tell me, I mean, I was thinking, oh, all this was basically once you've done your basic editing or whatever editing you do to the master picture, then you bring it into Photoshop. So
Yes.
I was surprised to hear you say you have them in your catalog.
Well, I have them in my catalog so that if I ever need to find them. So when I downloaded them, I put them into a folder and then I also imported them into my Lightroom catalog, just so I
that you
know,
can see them.
so that I can see them.
Yeah,
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly.
So
Now,
you probably went in and keywords and all that sort of stuff.
yeah. And then they do have some keywords in them, by the way. When you bought them, they came in with some keywords.
Oh, that's good.
But for everyday working, because there's 2 different ways I'm going to show you to open your textures. For everyday working, I also have them over in a folder, and that's under My Pictures. So I've got them in 2 places. So they're cataloged through Lightroom, but then I have them actually in a folder so I can work on them all the time. So they're always handy for me to get.
Okay.
Okay, so I am going to go into here and I'm going to grab, let me see, do I have you grab, open them? Oh yeah, open the main one +2. So I'm going to make sure that I'm telling you exactly like is on your handout. So I am going to open this black crested titmouse right here. And then I'm going to go up to the top and I'm going to open Aura, which is a texture. And then I'm going to go down to the bottom and I'm going to open Avior. Okay. So I am going to now open 3 pictures at one time. So they're opening up into Photoshop. There you go. And the black crested titmouse, the first one, you notice that this now over on the layers palette is called background. I'm going to pull this over just a little bit so you can see it better. It's called background. So the layers palette, if you haven't seen the layers palette, you go up here to Windows and you click on layers. Okay, so anytime you ever lose your layers palette, you go to Windows and you click on layers. And by the way, this tool palette right over here in my Photoshop, this toolbar right here, this is right here under tools. So in the event you ever lose it also, it's right there.
So Kathy, up there next to auto select in the left-hand corner, it says layer. So you had already, is that the same thing that you're doing here? Or is that something different up there next to auto select?
Where is auto?
Okay, look at the home in the top left.
Top left.
And then
Yeah.
Auto, and then layer. Is that what created that to go to layer, or is that different?
I don't know.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
I
don't know.
saw that and
Yeah,
wondered if
yeah,
that
yeah.
was it.
I don't
Okay,
know. And it
Okay.
probably is because I've got this one selected, but
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I
Okay.
hadn't paid attention to that one before. It's not important, whatever it is. Okay.
Okay.
Ignore that one. Okay. By the
So I
way,
have a quick question
Yeah,
too, Kathy. So the first image you bring in is the photo edited image, and it automatically becomes the background?
not necessarily. Because
Okay.
if you click on this image right here, aura, this texture,
Oh, I
see, it's a background in its own layer.
I
And
get it.
Avior is a background in its own layer. So anytime
Ah.
you open a picture into Photoshop, and if you see the layers palette, it's just immediately going to show you that it's a background.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for asking that, Dawn, because I had the same question.
It's a
Yeah.
good question. It's a real good question. Yeah.
Good to see the three, what happened there when you hit the three different images. So
Uh-huh.
that's really good.
So
Okay.
they all show up as a background. And every picture that you ever open up into Photoshop the first time around, it always shows up as a background.
Okay.
So, you know, so now you know what that looks like. And by the way, this is something that I learned today, and I wanted to emphasize to you all. This Windows and then clicking on these things right here, like here's the application frame, here's the toolbar, here's the options. Those are the things I have open right now. This is standard in every Adobe software package, because I opened Premiere today, which is a high-level video editing software, and I needed something. And I thought, well, it's got to be under Windows. And lo and behold, it was under Windows. So
Yeah.
this is typical in any Adobe software. Okay. So anytime you lose one of these little squares or rectangles, then find it by going to Window. Okay. Okay. Back to where we were. So now we are on page 3. We are on A2. I told you all about finding your layers palette. And now we're going to click on the tab for the first texture. So that's aura. Okay.
Okay.
Now I'm going to go to the marquee tool right here. And the marquee tool, I am now going to surround that texture. And it has the little marching ants around it right now. And then I'm going to do a Command C. If you're on a Mac, it's Command C. If you're on PC, it's what is it? Alt C or whatever. How do you copy on a PC?
I think it's Control.
Control C. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just like if you were in a Word document, all you did is just copied something. Now we're going to go back over to Black Crested Titmouse, our photo that we want to lay the textures on top of. And I'm going to do a Command V to copy. But I want you to look at that texture look at my screen, compared to the way the texture looked before.
Oh,
Do you see that the texture looks different?
yes.
You see that? And that's because the texture is bigger than the photograph. So I'm now going to go to Edit, Free Transform, and I get a red box around that texture. And notice over here where the layer palette is, the gray area is layer 1. It's the background. It's not the background, it's that texture that I laid over it. So this texture is much bigger than my photograph. So I have to grab the corner, move it, grab the corner, move it, and I'm resizing this by grabbing it and moving it. I'm just using my trackball to do this. I'm grabbing it and moving it until it's the same size as my photograph. And then when I do that, there we go. And then touch my move tool. Now my texture is the same size as my photograph.
If you wanted to just use a portion of that texture for some reason, could you leave it
You
slightly
could.
larger and move it around to the
You
part
could, exactly. You could, exactly. And you'll find that there's times when we're doing that because we want this color to be more in a certain area.
Okay,
So we can do that.
okay.
Okay. Now let's go get the other one. And by the way, this move tool right here, and it says move right next to it, by the way, move tool. See that? So now if I wanted to, I could move this around because it's a move tool. And that is doing it only to that layer because that's the layer that's activated, the gray one. That's how we know a layer is activated. Now let's go over to Avior. So this texture, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. And by the way, with this one, there we go. I'm doing my right click. You all can't see that, but I'm doing a right click. And it doesn't let the little box come up to say copy. You see that? And then also you notice that it's grayed out where it says copy right here. So I have to go to marquee tool and I have to copy it, or I have to surround it and then press Command C. Go back to my black crested titmouse and Command V to copy it over. And now you can see once again that that texture is really, really big. So what do we do because the texture is too big for the photograph?
We'll resize it.
How do we resize it?
With the,
The move tool.
Not yet the move tool. We got to go free transform first.
oh, yeah, right.
So we've got to go free transform first, and we've got to just bring it back into size, just kind of drag it around. There you go. Drag it around. And it's not moving any of the other photographs because look over on the right-hand side and you'll notice that only that layer 2 is grayed out. So it's not doing anything to anybody else except layer 2.
And the final image is going to be sized based on the background. Is that right?
Based on the original photograph. Exactly, exactly, exactly. And so now that we've got all 3 of the layers sitting on top of each other, we can go up here and we can get rid of the texture, and we can go up here and we can get rid of the texture. Did y'all see where I did that?
Yeah.
So we just don't need them anymore. So let's just get rid of them so that nothing gets confusing. And then since we've already copied them, and then this is where we can now start doing our magic.
Huh.
That I'll show you in just a second. So this is where we can start playing. So we have to get those 3 things on top of each other so that then we can start playing around. Okay, good. Okay. Now let me show you, that's what's called the manual method. So just like you're learning how to use your camera in the manual method, you remember when I taught you all that in the manual method, and now you can use aperture priority or shutter priority. That's the manual method. So you're going to do that as part of your homework. But I now want to show you the automated method. So I'm going to go back to my bridge.
So is the automated method on a different page?
It's on page 4.
Okay.
So the automated method is on page 4. So I am going to go back up here and I'm going to get the exact same Avior, and then black crested titmouse. There you go. Okay. So I highlighted all 3 of those that I want. There's 1, there's 2. So I've got 3 textures, 2 textures and 1 photograph that I've highlighted. Y'all with me?
Yep.
Okay. Now, if you're using Lightroom, you could do exactly the same thing in Lightroom. So it's exactly the same. And then, and I've given you, okay. And then you're going to go up here to Tools, Photoshop, load into Photoshop layers.
Huh.
Uh-huh.
So that's also in Lightroom?
Uh-huh.
Huh.
So in Lightroom, it's going to be, I've given it to you somewhere here. So, oh, in Lightroom, it's the next one down. It's in Photo Edit, Open as Layers in Photoshop. So it's
Okay.
exactly the same thing in Lightroom.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, that's another reason you have it in your Lightroom.
Yeah, except see, I don't do much processing in Lightroom. I like processing better over here in Bridge Adobe Camera Raw. It's what I've learned and it's what I know better.
Okay.
And it's easier for me to teach over here too, because things are a little bit bigger. So load, but they're all made by the same company. They all do the same thing. So load into Photoshop layers and then watch what happens. So just like when we've done some star trails before, and we've done some different things with night photography or stacking, and then it says it's currently busy because it is. And so tell it yes. And by the way, this only works if your version of Photoshop or Lightroom and your Lightroom and Bridge Adobe Camera Raw are all the same version. So if it ever doesn't work, if that's grayed out, it's because you don't have each one of the softwares the exact same version. So when you update them, make sure you update everybody. Okay, so now what you see is something that looks a bit different. So it's opened the photographs and you notice that Aura is on top, Avior is in the middle, and Black Crested Titmouse is on the bottom. And you notice now I don't have a background. I just have each one of the pictures with its own name. Nothing has been renamed background.
Right.
And then to turn off the layers, we click on the eyeball and that turns off the layers. And you notice how big the brush strokes are. So we already know that that means it's just way bigger than my original photograph. And then if I click off the eyeball, then all I'm left with is the Black Crested Titmouse. And where is it?
Got to move your scroll bars.
Yeah, there you go. So now we see that Black Crested Titmouse, and this, by the way, is my roller ball that I was able to make that bigger and smaller. So that Black Crested Titmouse is pretty small in the frame. So with this layer activated, so you want that layer activated because that's the layer that I'm working on, then we're going to go click on it. And if I click on it and just drag it, you notice that it just drags around. See that? So it doesn't get bigger or smaller. So if it's the wrong size, then I'm going to have to go in there and do that edit, free transform. And now I can drag it. So that little command, edit, free transform, turns out to be a pretty important command for us.
Mm-hmm.
And now when I go into Avior and turn that on, then if I want to check to see how big it is, make sure that that line is grayed out. I can go edit, free transform, and you see that it's the same size now. I don't have to edit. I don't have to transform it. And then let's go and let's check Aura at the same time and do edit, free transform. And once again, it's the same size. So what happens when we do the automated method is that the biggest photo ends up being, whether it's the layer or the photograph, the biggest photo ends up being the biggest one. And then you have to do your edit, free transform to make sure everybody's the same size.
So the largest sized photo determines the size of the canvas,
You got it
all of them.
for all of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we just have to move them around to resize them so that we can get them where we want them.
So if you crop something, your photo, and you had that titmouse, it was obviously very small, so you probably had cropped it. And you increase it to be bigger to meet those other sizes. Is that a problem in terms of resolution?
It might. It might. So if you cropped it too much and then tried to make it too big. So this whole picture, for instance, is 80 inches by 53 inches. So pixel wise, it's still fairly good. It's 6,000 by 4,000. So even though I cropped it, it's still a fairly, still fairly big picture.
Wow, so those textures are really huge.
They're big. They're big. Exactly. Exactly. And luckily they're in JPEGs. So they don't take up a lot of room, but yes, they are big.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then once again, because we have the textures, then we can start doing different things like, then we can start moving things around and playing around. Ooh. I like that one. And I'll show you how to do this in just a second. So this is where we can start playing with how things are going to look through each other and what they're going to look like. So this is where we can start playing. Good?
Very.
So far?
Mhm.
A little bit.
Little bit.
I'm ready to try it.
Okay, ready to put your hands on it, right? Okay, so let's work on a complete picture now. So we're going to use the manual method. Whoops, closed out my Photoshop. There we go. So we're going to use the manual method. So I'm going to go open. So I'm now on page 5.
Okay.
So I'm going to go open. And I'm going to go to Little Bee Eater. Right here. There we go. Little Bee Eater. And then I am going to open Vignette. Oh, sorry. Follow along the instruction, Kathy. I'm going to open Little Bee Eater. There we go. Okay. And then I'm going to go open so that I follow along exactly on my instructions. I'm going to go open Vignette 30.
Do you have all your textures combined into one folder, or do you have them based on where you got them, or what group they were with? Or?
No, just dumped them all in one folder.
Okay.
Yeah. I haven't really found the need to keep them separated.
Okay.
And by the way, I was telling you that they did have some information in them, and I'm going to move you all out of the way. But see, this one that I just opened up in Bridge, it gives the copyright information and what its name is.
Okay.
And where I got it from.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if, like, for example, you were talking about the French kiss connection, if you wanted to use multiple textures that go together from that same collection, you could search keywords and find them.
Yeah. And they're all named French Kiss at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'll sort them that way.
Yeah. So it'll sort them that way.
That helps. Okay.
Exactly. Okay. So I've got Vignette open and I've got Little Bee Eater open. And so I'm going to start just following my own recipe. And here, by the way, you notice that Little Bee Eater is called the background. And you notice that Vignette is called the background. So we're going to work on the Little Bee Eater. So that's where we are right now. And so I opened Vignette, and then in Vignette, I'm going to use the marquee tool. Got to move you all out of the way. I'm going to use the marquee tool to surround it. So just like that, Command C to copy it. And then I'm going to go to the Little Bee Eater, and I'm going to do a Command V to paste it over it. And then it looks pretty pronounced. So let's check to see how big it actually is. So let's do an edit, free transform. And you notice that layer 1 is highlighted. Otherwise, we would be working on something else. So you've always got to make sure the layer you're working on is highlighted. And now we've got those little bars showing up around. We don't have to resize this one too much. There we go. Okay, and then click the move tool, and that just simply sets it on top of each other. So now the layer with the texture is on top of the bee eater. And now I'm going to go open another layer texture. And I changed my mind this morning because I was looking at this and I got tired of the way it was looking. So I'm going to do something different. So I'm going to go get this Galaxis. There you go. Open it. There you go. Gives me a nice greenish type of background. And in Galaxis, one more time, just emphasizing to you all that if I try to do a copy with my right click on my mouse, I can't copy. And if I do edit, I can't copy because it's grayed out. So I have to go to my marquee tool and I have to grab it. There you go. Command C, go back over to my little bee eater and do a Command V, lay it over on top of each other or on top of all of the rest of them. And then I need to see if they are all the same size. So do the edit free transform. And you see, I didn't have to do as much this time. Now notice this one, this green layer.
Mhm.
You see how it's not the same size?
Mhm.
And that's just because it came from a different company. So I'm just going to let it overlap just a bit. And now when I press my move tool, I've got it sitting on top of the little bee eater on the bottom, the kind of canvas on the middle, and then the green on the top.
So one thing, Kathy, is that
Yes.
marquee tool, I don't work a lot in Photoshop, but I think I'll get with it. But that marquee tool is really just a selection tool.
It is. That's all it is. And if you, and luckily it also tells you it's a marquee tool right there. But then if you were selecting somewhere else, see, here's all the different ways that you can lasso or something like that.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the nice thing about the marquee is it's just a simple little rectangle.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I don't need the textures anymore. So I'm going to close them. So I have now on page 5, I have done 1, A, B, C, D, E, and F.
Okay.
And now our layers palette over here has 3 layers and we can only see layer 2. We can't see underneath layer 2 to see layer 1 or to see layer 2 or to see layer 1 or to see the background layer. And that's because layer 2 is sitting on top of everything. So it's blocking all of our photographs right now. So we are going to click on the eyeball to turn off layer 2. So the little eyeball right there. So click it on and we can see layer 2, click it off and we can't see layer 2. So layer 2 is essentially invisible at this point. And layer 1, let's click on it so that we can work on it. Let's change the blending mode right here. These are called blending modes right here. And the blending mode, the beautiful thing about blending modes now is that in the version of Photoshop we've had for the last 2 years, if I click on one or just hover over one of these blending modes, then the picture shows me what it will look like.
Oh, how nice.
It used to be we had to actually click and then go to see what somebody else would look like. But this has just made it so beautiful because we also used to have to memorize what dark color did or what lighten did or what screen did or color dodge did. But now we can see it. And so this means that we're working on our picture and we can say, ooh, do I like this or do I like this? So between overlay, I can't see my texture, soft light, excuse me, overlay, I can see my texture, soft light, I can't. Hard light, not much difference between soft light and hard light. So you see, this is where we can see what it's going to look like. And then you can go all the way down and look at this. Look at this difference and exclusion. I mean, you know, we could get weird here. So it all just depends on what you're looking for. So with this one, let me see, layer 2, and I am going to go up here. Let's see, I wanted to change this to linear burn, but I also saw when we were down here that this overlay looked kind of nice. How about overlay?
Mhm. Yeah, one of the things I like about the overlay is you can kind of see this more of the picture coming through also.
Yeah. So between linear burn, which is pretty dark, and
Yeah.
overlay, I think the overlay comes out looking a little bit better.
I like it.
Yeah.
Is there a way that you could take this this texture itself right here, this one, and change the color of it?
The blending mode.
I don't know if it's in blending or if you would have to take it someplace else and
We might
change.
have to take it someplace else. Let me show you where that is in a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So we could, whether this linear burn is right here,
Mhm.
we could go over here to the opacity or the fill. This is how dark we want to make that texture on top of the photograph.
Uh-huh.
So we could go over there and change it. Now, the difference between that's opacity, and here's, whoops, go back, do my fill. And here's fill. And if you notice, there's not a lot of difference between opacity and fill. Fill is if we have text. So fill will kind of hollow out text so that we can see colors and textures through the text. So like a chalkboard font, it'll make the chalkboard font look more like chalk. So it kind of hollows out text. I'll show you that when we're doing some text. So I'm going to go ahead and do linear burn, and I'm going to take it to about 57, 53, something like that. And then I'm going to go to layer 2. Let's click the eyeball back on that and click on layer 2. And now the picture's covered. Both of our layers are covered. And we're going to change the blend mode here to, let's see which one we like, because I'm using a different layer than I usually do. Overlay. Soft light, hard light.
That's interesting.
Hard light was interesting, wasn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with hard light because the other layer that I used to use for this recipe is a little lighter, and it's just, you don't see much difference. So layer 2, let's also change the opacity on that just a bit to kind of kick it back just a hair. So how's that?
That's good.
I like it.
Yeah.
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 So how do you
So
know
we went-
how many textures you want to use?
That's
Like
all up to
2 or
you.
3 or,
That's all up to you.
okay.
Sometimes I start with 2 or 3, and sometimes I start with a lot
Really?
because I could always decide that I only wanted to use that texture, but not the middle texture.
Uh-huh.
Or I could decide that I wanted to use that texture, but not the top texture. So
Mhm.
sometimes I'll go in and I'll just kind of, what the heck, choose 5 or 6 textures to start out with. But for
Okay.
right now, for you all, 3 is enough.
Yeah, more than enough.
So we went from that photograph to that photograph. And it just gives us something different to play with. And now I can go layer, flatten, And when I go layer flatten, they've now flattened. And I can do file, save as. And if I'm going to put it back in the same folder where it came from originally, then I can say that this is, I can put texture at the end of its name. And then I can simply whoops, there it is. My screen was blocked. So now I can save it and I've got it. Easy, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do something a little bit more advanced, okay? Y'all doing okay so far?
Doing good.
We'll let
Sandra,
you know
you
when
with?
we get to the homework.
Okay, Sandra, you with us? Okay, so let's go to another one. So we're going to be in Photoshop, and this one's going to become much more dramatic. So let's open. And in my folder, I'm going to go to London. And I am going to open it. And you see that it's a background layer. And also you notice this is a lock next to this. So this background layer now, or they all have had a lock. I just haven't pointed it out to you. But that lock keeps it in position because sometimes we might want to unlock it and move it up and down on the layer palette. So for right now, just understand there's a little lock right there. Now I'm going to go in and open 3 textures. And I'm going to go clove pink right here. And then I'm going to go to Centaurus right here. And then I am going to go to Albatross. And I'm going to open them. And let's click on clove pink. Now, Deborah, you asked me about, how do I choose? So this is a bizarre texture to put onto a night scene of London, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see if we like it or not.
Okay.
So I'm going to go to copy, put my marquee tool on it, Command C, go back to the picture of London and Command V. And you see how huge that texture is. So how do we make that texture smaller?
Free transfer.
Edit, free transform.
You got it. Good. So edit, free transform. Just, get real aggressive with it at the beginning because it's pretty big. So you see how big these textures are. They really are big. There you go. And make it as big as my picture. There we go. And now I'm going to place it on top of it and press my move tool. And now I'm going to go back into clove pink, the texture, and I'm going to close it because I don't need it anymore. And then I'm going to go click on Centaurus, which looks like a more civilized texture. And how do I get Centaurus on top of London, England?
Go to the marquee tool and select it.
You got it. Exactly. Command C, go back over to London, England, Command V. And how do I make sure that Centaurus is the same size as London, England?
Move. Hit the
Move.
Do you go back to one of the other layers and see? No.
No,
Gotta
you-
go to
Oh,
Transfer.
free
pre-edit.
transform.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I thought it was
gotta
a
go to,
question.
yeah, sorry. Gotta go to free transform. So we gotta
Yeah, right.
resize these things. There we go. Okay, and then click the move tool to set them on top of each other. Okay, so now we can get rid of Centaurus, and now we have to go get Albatross. Marquee tool, copy, Command C, go back over to London, Command V. Now what do we have to do?
Edit, free transform.
You got it. Edit, pre-transform. It's just a very repetitive technique. There you go. And then get rid of Albatross because we don't need it anymore. And now you see that I've got background, layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3. When I opened them in the automated method, where I opened all 3 of them at one time, then they retain their file names. When I copy them on top of each other, they don't retain their file names. If it's important to you, you can always click this and right click and you can rename it someplace in there. Yeah. Oh, you just double click on it. Yeah, there you go. So I can always rename this. So just in case you ever need to know if you can rename a layer, you can rename it that way. Okay, so we've got all 3 layers on top of each other. And now we're going to click the eyeball on layer 2, and we're going to, and layer 3 to turn them off. So we're going to click the eyeball and click the eyeball. So now what we have is the pink layer, that gaudy pink layer, layer 1, on top of our picture of London. So we're going to blend layer 1 into the background layer. When you click this blending mode right here, it takes the activated photo and blends it into the photo underneath it. So when you click on your blending layers, it takes the one that's activated and blends it into the one underneath it. Okay, so we're going to take layer 1 and we've turned off layer 2 and layer 3. So on layer 1, we're going to blend it to the background layer. So it's activated, it's gray. So now I'm going to go through my layers and see what each one of them looks like. So you see what multiply looks like, and you see what color burn and linear burn. You see what lighten looks like. You see what screen looks like, color dodge. Color dodge is kind of interesting, isn't it? Linear dodge, lighten, and then we get to overlay. And by the way, overlay, soft light are just kind of the standards. So you end up using them more than anything else. Sometimes I use some of these up in here if I'm going for a darker picture, but in overlay, overlay gives me what I want. So it's got that texture, but notice that now I have a little bit of pink in this photograph.
Yeah. It's
But
nice.
not much.
Not much though. Yeah, not much. So overlay, and notice also that, you know, we were able to look at each one of our blending modes as we went through it. Now, if that's too much pink for you, remember that you can always go up here and change one of these. But for right now, I'm going to leave it because I'm just overlaying that burlap on top of my picture. So now I've got my burlap in there. And now I'm going to click on layer 2. And background layer and layer 1 also have their little eyeballs next to them. See that? So I'm going to click on layer 2 because if I left it on layer 1, then that's the one I'd be working on. I'm going to click on layer 2 because that's the one that I'm going to work on. And now I'm going to play with my blending modes again. And I'm going toward, that's what it looks like at darken. That's what it looks like at color, linear, burn, darken. And I'm moving toward linear light. Yeah, there we go. Look what happens when I get down to linear light. So I've got kind of smudges all over there. And you see what happened at vivid. looks different, hard light. So I've got a little bit more aggression going on here with this linear light. So I'm going to keep linear light. It's a little too dark for me. So I'm going to go up here to opacity and I'm going to move this down to about 49%. There you go. So now it's not as aggressive as it was. So I've got kind of smudges going on in here. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you all can see what's going on. So I've got kind of smudges going on. I've got burlap in the back. So I've got some fun stuff going on. Make it just a little bit bigger for you all. Okay, so I'm going to click on layer 3 now, turn it on, highlight it, and I'm going to do the same as above. So now I'm peeling it down into the photograph underneath it. So I'm going to do the same as above, and I'm going to come through here, look at which one I like. And I'm going to end up going with that linear light once again, because this kind of gives me a foggy appearance. And it's a little too much. So I'm going to change it just a bit. Okay. So what happened once I got to this point originally was I realized my picture now is totally different than what I started with. So now I've got a foggy scene in London at night. I'm not dealing with anymore a crystal clear picture of London at night. I've got kind of a foggy, menacing type picture. So now we're going to play around just a little bit more. So I'm going to click on the bottom layer right here. So now I'm at the bottom of page 6, by the way. Click on the bottom layer. And now I'm going to go to the top of page 7. And in the bottom right-hand corner, right down here, see where my cursor is? Everybody
Yes.
got it?
Yes.
Sandra, you got it? Deborah, you got it?
Mm.
Yeah? Okay. I'm going to go in the bottom right-hand corner. I'm going to click on adjustment layer. Yeah, that's a layer mask. There you go. That's an adjustment layer. And this is a new group, and this is a new layer. By the way, in Adobe products, anything that is tiny print that is impossible to read is important. Okay, that's all there is to it. If they make it in big print, chances are you're not going to use it. But right down here, little teeny weeny print, it's important. Okay, so I'm going to click on adjustment layer, and I'm going to scroll through here until I get to channel mixer right here. Channel mixer. And when I click on channel mixer, I get a new palette. See that?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to click on monochrome.
Mm. Mm.
Ooh,
And my photo just turned black and white.
Sepia.
Yeah. So now by clicking monochrome in that new channel mixer box, I'm going to reduce the contrast just a bit by about -15, about like that. So now I've got a dark and gloomy type of photo. And if you wanted to, you could play with the reds and the greens and the blues to your heart's content. But we'll leave it right there for right now. Okay, so that was adjustment layer channel mixer. And see what happened is I got right above the picture of London. I got the channel mixer layer that only changed the color of the picture of London, because remember, it only changes underneath. So that channel mixer now is only working on the picture of London. So now we can get rid of that. And click on any eyeball to turn off that layer. And so Deborah asked, how do you know which ones to use? Personally, at this point, I don't like the pink anymore.
Hmm.
What do y'all think?
I agree.
Yeah.
There might be other colors that we could have started with other than pink that I would like, but I'm not a fan of that one.
Yeah. So I'm going to turn off that pink one now because I don't want that pink one. But I'm going to click on this background layer right here again, because there's something else that I want to do. That's only the picture that we're working on. We're not working on any of the layers. We're only working on this one right here. I'm going to click on filter way up here at the top of Photoshop. I'm going to click on filter, and then I'm going to go to blur gallery, and then I'm going to go to field blur. And now I get, see how my layers went away? And I have a whole new tool palette over here.
Right.
So this new tool palette over on the right-hand side, what, Deborah?
Are you still just working on the background layer? or
I'm
are you
only
working on-
I'm only working on the picture of London.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. But the layers are showing through unless I turn them off, but we're just working on the picture of London right now.
Okay.
So notice that I got this whole new tool palette over here. And so now I can go slide the blur slider. Slide the blur slider. There we go. So this determines how much of this photo we're going to blur or we're not going to blur. There you go, like that. And also I can move this little red dot. And I can also grab this little thing right here. And this can determine how much I'm going to blur and how much I'm not going to blur. So it went all the way over. So I'm just going to blur this one just a little bit. There you go. And I don't like what I just did. So I'm going to go to I'm going to get rid of that one because I don't like that one at all. Let me see. Oh, I'm going to go to iris blur. That's the one that I wanted. Iris blur, I can now move it like this, and wherever the center of the iris is, that's what will be in focus.
Oh.
So I can pull it as an oblong. I can pull it over. I can pull the edges closer. So see how you could just kind of sit and play for a while, figure out exactly which way you want to go. And now I can pull that down just a little bit more or else a little bit more. So I can move that one around as well, playing around with it. And I can move the interior to let the exterior blur just a little bit more.
Hmm.
And then below where it says effects, I can do the light bokeh. And this is where on any light sources, like see how there's a starburst right there where the building is. I
Mhm.
can do a light bokeh and I can move this around and it'll make those starbursts bigger. And notice what it just did over here.
Oh, yeah, right.
So now you could see how, oh, okay, we could kind of pull that in just a little bit more. We could pull this side in maybe a little bit. We could maybe move this over here.
Huh.
See that?
Yeah.
And then when you're finished playing with this filter, click OK up here at the top. So learn from my mistakes, okay? Click OK. And when you click OK, your toolbar on the left comes back and your layer palette on the right comes back.
So is there a layer or I guess sub-layer over there that has those changes in it now? Is that in the
No, it's
channel
been done
mixer?
to the
It's been
background.
done to the image itself.
Mhm.
Okay.
So that wouldn't be under adjustments there next to the, in that palette, go to the top.
Right here.
Yeah.
No, those are different adjustment layers I can use.
So does that mean the changes that you have made are permanent?
Yeah, unless you want to go up here to edit, undo,
Okay.
because then we could go to edit, undo. And if you weren't sure about that, we could have copied that background and only done it on a copy of the background.
Oh,
So
But
if you,
if you do it the way you just did, you can't do something else and then come turn those on and off.
right,
But if you did a background, then you would
uh-huh,
have that option.
right. So I could have copied that background layer
mhm,
before I started messing with it. And then if I needed to, I could have always thrown it away or gone back to what I had or turned it off. Yeah.
If you copied it, Kathy, would it be another layer there then?
Uh-huh.
That you would have, but would it still show the other layers on both
It
copies?
does. And when you
Okay.
copy it, it's a Command J and watch. See how I just copied the background? So now I have a background copy.
But it's really a layer. It's just called
Uh-huh.
background copy.
Mhm. Yeah,
If you decide you make different adjustments to both of those layers and you decide you want to keep the one that's called background copy, so you delete background,
Uh-huh.
does background copy now become your background?
uh-huh, it does. Yeah. Yeah. And that's sometimes why we copy a base layer, because once we fiddle with it, it may not be exactly what we want, or we might want to blend it back with the original.
Okay,
mhm.
Yeah.
okay.
So you see what we started with and what we ended with, even though we've messed with that layer. Pretty different, isn't it? But I still don't like the pink one.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's taking you down this rabbit hole just a little bit more. And it's saying, well, wait a second, because I did a file save as, and it says, well, wait a second, you got a layer there. Do you want to keep that or not? And I'm going to say, no, I don't want to keep that. So when I flatten it all, now everything is done. You have one option now to do an edit, undo, flatten. Otherwise you're finished. And
Ah,
there are
That's the
ways.
pink layer, the pink layer that was hidden
Uh-huh.
or supposedly hidden. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
we got rid of that. But I've got one option to go edit, undo, flatten, and now it took me back to where I was. But otherwise, once I start doing other things, I'm not going to be able to go back. There is a way that we can save all of this so that we can work on it tomorrow. And if you go in here and you do File, Save As, then it'll say that we have to save this as a Photoshop file, and it'll save it in layers so that we can go back and work on it later on.
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So on this one, we're just going to do a layer flatten. It's also very big. So if we're going to save something,
Oh.
it better be pretty important.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
good
because
point.
it's very big. It has a lot of information on it. And then this is a texture. And then this is version probably 3, something like that. I always save them with a new file name so that I can easily find my textures in my my files. Good?
Good,
Y'all good on that one?
Sorta.
great.
Okay.
We get to watch the video, right?
You get to watch the video. Exactly.
That'll help.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm going to do one more for you and say that's okay. We know what we're doing. And we are going to go into Trilingua. Trilingua. There we go. And we are going to go into Virgo, and we are going to go into Amalfi. There we go. So I'm going to use the automated method now. I showed you the manual method where we copy and paste and where we transform and all that stuff. But now I'm simply going to go to Tools, Photoshop, load into Photoshop layers. And once again, it's the same thing if you're over in Lightroom. This will tell me that Photoshop is still busy. Tell it, okay, it's not really busy. It just thinks it is. And now they are laying on top of each other. And if you, I don't know if you all can see this, but underneath Virgo, it shows a little bitty checkerboard underneath it.
Yeah,
Can y'all see that?
Yeah.
And that's just telling me that Virgo is not as big as the other ones. And so with that one, we would just simply do and make sure Virgo's activated. See how I just made a mistake? Virgo wasn't activated, so I couldn't do a free transform on it. Free transform, and then just pull it to the side like that. There we go. And then, so now everything is, they're all on top of each other. Notice that they're in alphabetical order when we do it in the automated method. So they're in alphabetical order. The layers are stacked. So we want to reorder them so that Trilingua is on the bottom. I usually like to have the photo on the bottom. Texture is in the middle and Virgo is on top. So Amalfi is in the middle and Virgo is on top. There we go. And then we're going to highlight the Trilingua and the texture right here, the Trilingua and the texture. And I'm going to turn off Virgo. There we go. And I'm going to change the blending mode to soft light. So now the words are overlaying on top of the photograph. So I've got them overlaying on top of each other. And now I'm going to turn on the third layer and I'm going to highlight all three layers at the same time. So this is a different way of doing it because now they're all going to merge down. So it's a different, a slightly different way of doing it. I think it's a little more dangerous when you have all three of them highlighted. And then I'm going to change my blend mode to hard light right there or soft light. Soft light, I also liked when I was up
there's
here.
one up there that was pretty nice.
Which one?
There was one up there. I don't remember which one. Go down.
Must be the multiply.
Oh,
Come on, catch up with me, multiply. There, multiply.
no, keep going down. It's not catching up with you. Oh, go up to that one. I liked that one.
Dark, you like that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not too crazy about that one. Because a lot of my, let's click it just to see, because a lot of stuff is zeroed out for some reason.
Oh, I do see that on the print.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do see that.
Yeah, it's kind of cutting through all the way.
Yeah,
Now, notice something, by the way. You know how I have all three of them highlighted?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going to take the opacity, and if I take it all the way down, you see how I zeroed all of them out because I have all three of them activated. So let's take it back and then let's see what we can do. Yeah, undo the master opacity. There we go. And now we've got because we've already got, but I'm going to have to undo all of this. There we go. So I'm going to have to, which one did we do on this one? Soft light? Yeah, we did soft light
Yeah,
on this
soft
one.
light, yeah.
Now I'm going to go to that Virgo and don't highlight all three of them. And now I'm going to go, here's that multiply again that looks halfway decent.
Yeah,
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 A bit dark, but that
Yeah.
means we can take that opacity and we can lighten it up just a bit.
that's nice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you rarely want to highlight all the layers and blend them all into each other, because then you eventually just get to where there's nothing on the bottom.
Yeah.
And you see how each one of them, when you kind of get in there and start playing, has a different feel to it. And then here we would do a layer flatten. And then we simply would do a file save as, and we're done. So fun, isn't it?
It looks like it. I'm ready.
You're ready? Good. So this is the don't save. Okay, so what your homework? Let me get out of this. Any questions before I leave these screens?
not yet.
Okay. There you go. And let me stop sharing my screen. That way we can all see each other. There we go. So we can all see each other. Okay, so your homework assignment on page 9. You made it past 9 pages tonight. Your homework assignment. You're going to create one image using the manual method to create a layer stack. So you're going to highlight them and you're going to bring them in, you know, and copy them and all that other stuff. So you're going to use that manual method. Note any problems, hangups, and be sure to share those with the class. So any places where you end up making a mistake, you forgot to do something, be sure to share it with us. And then you're going to create one image using the automated method. That's where we open them all from either Lightroom or Bridge. And once again, do the same thing. Share any problems you might have had, share any issues you might have had. And then I want you also to create another image using at least one channel mixer and one blur.
Okay.
Okay, so you're going to create 3 images. What I'm going to do is I'm going to upload the pictures that I did tonight and the layer and the textures that I used tonight. Now realize that I paid for these textures, so you can use them, but you can't go public use them. Okay, I'm letting you use them just out of courtesy. And so by putting them in a folder, if you want to try to actually go by my step by step, then you've got the same pictures I had. But if you'd like to branch out, buy your own textures, you break open those textures you already bought, Deborah. Or if you want to use your own pictures on my textures, you're more than welcome to. Whatever you want to do. So you've got 3 photos that you've got to deliver by next Monday. Go ahead.
Do you want us to send those to you, or do you want us to share those during Zoom?
So what you're going to do is you're going to send them to me. I'm going to send you a link to my Dropbox, and my Dropbox is where the filters are and the textures are and my pictures are.
Okay.
And then that link to that Dropbox will allow you to get my stuff out of your Dropbox, but then also you can upload your stuff into the Dropbox as well. And then Monday afternoon, we're doing this on Tuesday evening. So Monday afternoon, I'll go in and I'll get your pictures. If you're running behind, let me know and I'll go in and, you know, check your pictures if I have to, you know, right up to class. But I'd like it if I could get them by Monday afternoon, if I could. And then I can put them into a program. And then that's where we can talk about problems you had, issues you had, things that didn't work, 5 times you had to try it before you finally got it to work. So follow those recipes and then hopefully they work. Okay. Questions?
It's okay if we can find pictures that we think we want to do of our own, certainly. Okay. All right. got
You
it.
are more than welcome to. All I want you to do is use at least one of the manual method where you pull them in individually. Use one of the automated method where you pull them in all together. Your pictures or my pictures, doesn't matter. And then one where you're using a channel mixer and one blur. So you can go in and get your own pictures if you want to. By all means, have fun doing that. Or if you just want to work with mine, you're welcome to do that. Okay.
Okay.
Y'all were
Okay.
good. Thank you very much. You're
Thank
very,
you.
very nice and easy to work with.
We'll
I,
see how
Kathy, I
much.
remember I did take this class one time and it was Greek. So now, now I can follow.
Is it making more sense now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good,
definitely.
good.
But I remember when you were doing some of that, I was like, oh yeah, that's ringing a bell. So yeah.
Okay, good. It takes a while sometimes to click. And I still find myself, trying to do something too fast in layers and suddenly going, wait a second, slow down, slow down, slow down. Read the instructions, follow along, because you just, sometimes all it takes is that one step that you missed and it's gone.
And then I'll confuse myself, not knowing which step it was that I missed.
Exactly. So it's just like baking, or anything else. Deborah, you do pottery. So it's just the same thing, isn't it? You make one mistake somewhere along the way and it's not working.
Oh, I forget to cut under a wide flat piece when I throw it. And then the next week I try to get it off the bat and it's just not going to happen.
See, we have that with everything. It's sewing, it's layers, it's
Yeah.
baking, it's pottery. We've got it with
Yeah.
everything. That if you skip past one thing and thinking you're cutting corners, it doesn't work.
Yep.
No, it'll catch up eventually with you. Okay, I had a good time. Thank you
Me
very
too.
much.
Good,
I look
thank
forward to
you.
seeing your pictures.
Thank
right.
you.
Okay,
Thanks, Kathy.
I'll see you all.
Bye.
Good night, guys.
Bye, y'all.
Right.